Welcome back, everybody. So glad you could be with me here today for the beginning of the great number 4.5 smoother shootout. And to start this show off, we're going to do it in price order and we'll mention weights as we go. I'm still working on the spreadsheet. It's coming. But first up, we've got the Battle of the Stanleys. The Stanley Bailey 4.5, made about 1936, and the Stanley Bedrock corrugated bottom, made about 1910. About. Now, the Stanley is the lowest cost plane in the bunch, and it comes in at 4.58 pounds. And in this corner, the Bedrock, weighing in at 4.79 pounds. So a fraction heavier. It would have been a little bit heavier if this were a smooth sole, but it's a corrugated sole. So that's where we are with the weights. So cost-wise, these are probably the two least costly planes in the lineup. Now, in preparation for the shootout, I have the piece of cherry all prepped, and I measured it, and it's almost exactly at 1 1/8 inch thick. And I made a mark here so I know where I measured it. I'm going to want to see how much wood we plane off by the end of this. So my plan is to smooth plane one side, flip it over, smooth plane the other side with each plane as we go. All right. Not going to fuss. It's going to be more or less whatever it does, it does. And we will look at the results without going over it and over it and over it. So I am going to make some registration marks to keep me in line, knowing that it has all been planed. Now we can close this down a little bit. And we're not doing any edge planing because these are smoothers and not a jack plane or a joiner plane. So make a little room. First up, my Stanley 4.5. Nothing has changed since I set them up. I haven't touched the blades. I haven't adjusted them. So the first thing I'm going to do is back this one off just a quarter turn. All right? And then engage it so it will advance. A little oil from the oil in the can. And away we go. I'm getting just a little tiny shaving in the middle, so now I can advance. All right. And there we go. Now, one of the things right out of the gate is sound. Remember, this has perhaps one of the thinnest of the irons. This one and the Stanley Bedrock. And that's where some of that sound comes from. All right. All the registration marks are gone. Let's look for tear out. We've got some coarse grain here, here, naturally around this spike knot. I've been calling it a pin knot, but it's really more of a spike that goes all the way through. A little bit, it's not tear out, but you can see some dullness where the grain reverses. And of course, there's this gnarly section down here. But for the most part, that feels pretty good. So we'll make a mark here so we know we were planing in this direction. Flip it over. We'll do the same thing on this side. Now, many of you know that I have made comments in the past when you're working wood, what you do to one side, you want to do to the other. We've got that gnarly section is on this side now. So one of the questions that came up is, why go with a wider plane if you're going to put a pretty hefty camber on it? And that's almost done. Well, if I wanted to, I could take some of the camber off and, all right, that's done. I could take some of the camber off and get a wider shaving. That's totally up to you. A little bit of tear out here, a little bit of tear out there. So it is not tear out free. The mouth opening probably could be closed a bit more. So now, for the bedrock, we'll do the same thing. And seeing as we're on this face already, we will make some registration marks. Now, this plane automatically is cutting wider. I must not have put as much camber on it. If you recall, the thin blade had to be hand sharpened, freehand, because when I would clamp it in the jig, it would bend. All right. All the registration marks are gone. And I'm feeling the same tear out there and there and there as before. In fact, that might even be a little worse. Here, here, Here. As to the mouth opening, I tightened this one down some. So, flip it over. As to shaving thickness, I'm not even going to try to measure them because they're in that thousandth of an inch range. All right, so now comes the question. That is slightly improved using the Bedrock. Slightly improved. Now comes the real big question. Can we eliminate the tear out with either or both of these planes by taking an even thinner shaving? So you see what we've been getting. Let's try backing off my 4.5, skewing it, and taking the finest shaving I can take. So that improved it to some degree. Let's find another spot right in here. I mean, you run your hand across this, it is smooth. Not tear out free right there. So my next attempt with this would be to move the frog forward a fraction of an inch, but I'm not going to do it in the shootout. We're going to call this, we'll call the Stanley done. And now I'm going to take the Bedrock to these areas that my Stanley didn't quite eliminate tear out. All right. I'm going to back up the shaving. and we're going to skew it, taking the finest shaving I can. So this is not a purely scientific test. There is human error involved in the sharpening to some degree. Hardly getting a cut. It's just ever so slightly better. So I think at this point, this is a wash. They both performed beautifully on the cherry, but there's still tear out. Now, on to the beech. The beech has a tough spot on this end. And then on this side, we have this knot and this other strange grain. What should we do? We'll try both of them. First up, will be the Stanley. Okay, now, because we are smoothing and not jointing, we're going to work it the way I like to work my boards. Do the front, do the middle, lift, still got a little hollow right here. All right, so that is like glass. I have a little bit of a hollow here. We'll work that out in other runs. A little bit of a hollow here. This section up here is still a little tear out there and there. Now, what if you were taking lumber straight from the planer, which is what this surface is, and it has some tough conditions? Let's try it. Let's try it. I'm going to thin it down just a little bit more. See, that's the other thing too, is the plane pulling to task? Or do you have to bulldog it down? Now, the other reason why you might want to consider a wider bodied plane is not so much for the width of the cut, but it's the footprint. You got more stability. You're not working with a narrow plane, you're working with something wider. Getting not tear out, but it's the beech medullary rays. They're coming up here like little bird's eyes. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Okay, so we'll go from the Stanley to the Bedrock. Now the Bedrock's going to have a disadvantage with this bark inclusion down here. So we'll start ahead of that, give it some fairness. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Now we're going to give it a test over this bark inclusion. I'm skewing the plane so it slices through. All right. So